And here we are with your Daily Johnson. Sounds weird. On the 23rd of June, I again wrote to Dr. Johnson, enclosing a shipmaster's receipt for a jar of orange marmalade and a large packet of Lord Hailes' Annals of Scotland. So now we have a response from Johnson to that. To James Boswell, Esquire. Dear Sir, I have just received your packet from Mr. Thrales, but have not daylight enough to look much into it. I am glad that I have credit enough with Lord Hailes to be trusted with more copy. I hope to take more care of it than of the last. I return Mrs. Boswell my affectionate thanks for her present, which I value as a token of reconciliation. Poor Dodd was put to death yesterday in opposition to the recommendation of the jury. The petition of the City of London and a subsequent petition signed by 23,000 hands. Surely the voice of the public, when it calls so loudly and calls out for mercy, ought to be heard. The saying that was given me in the papers I never spoke, but I wrote many of his petitions and some of his letters. He applied to me very often. He was, I am afraid, long flattered with hopes of life, but I had no part in the dreadful delusion, for as soon as the king had signed his sentence, I obtained from Mr. Chamier an account of the disposition of the courts towards him, with the declaration that there was no hope even of a respite. This letter immediately was laid before Dodd, but he believed those whom he wished to be right, as it is thought, till within 3 days of his end. He died with pious composure and resolution. I have just seen the ordinary that attained him. His address to his fellow convicts offended the Methodists, but he had a Moravian with him much of his time. Quotes, footnote here that the Moravian was the Reverend Benjamin Latrobe. His moral character is very bad. I hope all is not true that is charged upon him. Of his behavior in prison, an account will be published. I give you joy of the country house and your pretty garden. I give you your joy of your country house and your garden, and hope sometime to see you in your felicity. I was much pleased with your 2 letters that have been kept so long in store. Footnote about that I'll get to in a second. And rejoice at Miss Rassey's advancement and wish Sir Alan success. I hope to meet you somewhere towards the north, but am loath to come quite to Carlisle. Can we not meet at Manchester? But we will settle it in some other letters. Mr. Seward, footnote here says this is William Seward, Esquire, FRS, editor of Anecdotes of Some Distinguished Personages, etc., in 4 volumes, 8 volumes, well known to a numerous and valuable acquaintance for his literature, love of the fine arts, and social virtues. I am indebted to him for several communications concerning Johnson. Anyway, Mr. Seward, a great favorite at Streatham, has been, I think, kindled by our travels with a curiosity to see the Highlands. I have given him letters to you and Beattie. He desires that a lodging may be taken for him at Edinburgh against his arrival. He is just setting out. Langston has been exercising the militia. Mrs. Williams is, I fear, declining. Dr. Lawrence says he can do no more. She has gone to summer in the country, with as many conveniences about her as she can expect, but I have no great hope. We must all die. May we all be prepared. I suppose Miss Boswell reads her book, and young Alexander takes to his learning. Let me hear about them, for everything that belongs to you belongs in a more remote degree, and not, I hope, very remote too, dear Sir. Yours affectionately, Sam Johnson, June 28, 1777. Footnote from before about Boswell's 2 letters that had been kept so long in store. This is the footnote. Since they have been so much honored by Dr. Johnson, I shall insert them. So here's 2 letters from Boswell to Johnson. To Mr. Samuel Johnson. My ever dear and much respected sir, You know my solemn enthusiasm of mind. You love me for it, and I respect myself for it, because insofar I resemble Dr. Johnson. You will be agreeably surprised when you learn the reason of my writing this letter. I am at Wittenberg in Saxony. I am in the old church where the Reformation was first preached and where some of the reformers lie interred. I cannot resist the serious pleasure of writing to Mr. Johnson from the tomb of the Melanchthon. My paper rests upon the gravestone of that great and good man who was undoubtedly the worthiest of all the reformers. He wished to reform abuses which had been introduced into the church, but had no private resentment to gratify. So mild was he that when his aged mother consulted him with anxiety on the perplexing disputes of the times, he advised her to keep to the old religion. At this tomb, then, my ever dear and respected friend, I vow to thee an eternal attachment. It shall be my study to do what I can to render your life happy. And if you die before me, I shall endeavor to do honor to your memory. And elevated by the remembrance of you, persist in noble piety. May God and the Father of all beings, ever bless you, and may you continue to love your most affectionate friend and devoted servant, James Boswell, Sunday, September 30th, 1764. So that comes from a while ago. It's now 1777. And then here's another love letter, I guess you could call it, from Wilton House, April 26, 1775, so a little more recently. My dear sir, every scene of my life confirms the truth of what you have told me. There is no certain happiness in the state of being. I am here amidst all that you know is at Lord Pembroke's, and yet I am weary and gloomy. I am just setting out for the house of an old friend in Devonshire, and shall not get back to London for a week yet. You said to me last Good Friday, with a cordiality that warmed my heart, that if I came to settle in London, we should have a day fixed every week to meet by ourselves and talk freely. To be thought worthy of such a privilege cannot but exalt me. During my present absence from you, while notwithstanding the gaiety which you allow me to possess, I am darkened by temporary clouds. I beg to have a few lines from you, a few lines merely of kindness, as a viaticum, till I see you again. In the vanity of human wishes and in Parnell's contentment, I find the only sure means of enjoying happiness, or at least the hopes of happiness. I am, ever am, with reverence and affection, most faithfully yours, James Boswell. So here's a letter from Johnson to Boswell. Again, to the same, dear sir. This gentleman is a great favorite at Streatham, I don't know how to pronounce it. Streatham, Stretham. Streatham, maybe. And therefore you will easily believe that he has very valuable qualities. Our narrative has kindled him with a desire of visiting the Highlands after having already seen a great part of Europe. You must receive him as a friend, and when you have directed him to the curiosities of Edinburgh, give him instructions and recommendations for the rest of his journey. I am, dear sir, your most humble servant, June 24th, 1777, Sam Johnson. Johnson's benevolence to the unfortunate was, I am confident, as steady and active as that of any of those who have been most eminently distinguished for that virtue. Innumerable proof of it, I have no doubt, will be forever concealed from mortal eyes. We may, however, form some judgment of it from the many and very various instances which have been discovered. One which happened in the course of the summer is remarkable from the name and connection of the person who was the object of it. The circumstance to which I allude is ascertained by two letters, one to Mr. Langton and another to the Reverend Dr. Vyse, rector of Lambeth, son of the respectable clergyman at Lichfield, who was contemporary with Johnson and whose father's family Johnson had the happiness of being kindly received in his early years. Dr. Johnson to Bennett Langton, Esquire. Dear Sir, I have lately been much disordered by a difficulty of breathing, but I am now better. I hope your host is well. You know we have been talking lately of St. Cross at Winchester. I have an old acquaintance whose distress makes him very desirous of an hospital, and I am afraid I have not strength enough to get him into the chateau. He is a painter who never rose higher than to get his immediate living, and from that, at 83, he is disabled by a slight stroke of the palsy, such as does not make him at all helpless on common occasions, though his hand is not steady enough for his art. My request is that you will try to obtain a promise of the next vacancy from the bishops of Chester. It is not a great thing to ask, and I hope we shall obtain it. Dr. Wharton has promised to favor him with his notice, and I hope he may end his days in peace. I am, sir, your most humble servant. June 29, 1777. Sam Johnson. To the Reverend Dr. Weiss at Lambeth. Sir, I doubt not, but you will readily forgive me for taking the liberty of requesting your assistance in recommending an old friend to his Grace the Archbishop as governor of the Charterhouse. His name is De Groot. He was born in Gloucester. I have known him many years. He has all the common claims to charity, being old, poor, and infirm in a great degree. He has likewise another claim to which no scholar can refuse attention. He is by several descendants the nephew of Hugo Grotius, of him from whom perhaps every man of learning has learned something. Let it not be said that in any lettered country a nephew of Grotius asked a charity and was refused. I am, Reverend Sir, your most humble servant, July 1777, Sam Johnson. Now, a letter from Reverend Dr. Weiss to Mr. Boswell, Lambeth, June 9th, 1787, so much later, 10 years later. Sir, I have searched in vain for the letter which I spoke of, and which I wished at your desire to communicate to you. It was from Dr. Johnson to return me thanks for my application to Archbishop Cornwallis in favor of poor De Groot. He rejoices in the success it met with, and is lavish in the praise he bestows upon his favorite, Hugo Grotius. I am really sorry that I cannot find this letter, as it is worthy of the writer. That which I sent you enclosed, the preceding letter, is at your service. It is very short, and will not perhaps be thought of any consequence, unless you should judge proper to consider it as a proof of the very humane part which Dr. Johnson took in behalf of a distressed and deserving person. I am, sir, your most obedient, humble servant, W. Weiss. That's 1787. They were still saying, "Your obedient, humble servant." At the end of every letter. For a while, it doesn't really mean anything, does it? Dr. Johnson to Mr. Edward Dilly. Oh, there's a bracketed footnote down here that tells us this is not really Edward Dilly. This is really William Sharp. There's no explanation for that error, so we're just going to have to believe whoever wrote that footnote. Sir, to the collection of English poets, I have recommended the volume of Dr. Watts to be added. His name has long been held by me in veneration, and I would not willingly be reduced to tell of him only that he was born and died. Yet, of his life I know very little, and therefore must press him in a manner very unworthy of his character, unless some of his friends will favor me with the necessary information. Many of them must be known to you, and by your influence, perhaps I may obtain some instruction. My plan does not exact much, but I wish to distinguish Watts, a man who never wrote but for a good purpose. Be pleased to do for me what you can. I am, sir, your humble servant, Sam Johnson, Bolt Court, Fleet Street, July 7th, 1777. So this is Boswell to Dr. Samuel Johnson again from Edinburgh, July 15, 1777. It's hard for me to say 1777 for some reason. My dear sir, The fate of poor Dr. Dodd made a dismal impression upon my mind. Ellipses. I had sagacity enough to divine that you wrote his speech to the recorder before sentence was pronounced. I am glad you have written so much for him, and I hope to be favored with an exact list of the several pieces when we meet. I received Mr. Seward as the friend of Mr. and Mrs. Thrale, and as a gentleman recommended by Dr. Johnson to my attention. I have introduced him to Lord Kames, Lord Mondabo, or Monbado, and Mr. Nairn. He has gone to the Highlands with Dr. Gregory. When he returns, I shall do more for him. Sir Alan MacLean has carried the branch of his cause of which we had good hopes. The President and one other judge only were against him. I wish the House of Lords may do as well as the Court of Sessions has done, but Sir Alan has not the lands of Brolus quite cleared by the judgment, till a long account is made up of debts and interests on the other side, and rents on the other. I am, however, not much afraid of the balance. No idea what he's talking about here. Macquarie's estate, Staffa and all, were sold yesterday and bought by a Campbell. I fear he will have little or nothing left out of the purchase money. I send you the case against the Negro by Mr. Cullen, son to Dr. Cullen, in opposition to Maclaren's for liberty, of which you have approved. Pray read this and tell me what you think as a politician as well as a poet upon the subject. Be so kind as to let me know how your time is to be distributed next autumn. I will meet you at Manchester or where you please, but I wish you would complete your tour of the cathedrals and come to Carlisle, and I will accompany you as part of the way homewards. I am ever most faithfully yours, James Boswell. And now a letter from Sam Johnson to James Boswell, Esquire. Dear Sir, your notion of the necessity of a yearly interview is very pleasing to both my vanity and tenderness. I shall perhaps come to Carlisle another year, but my money has not held out so well as it used to do. I shall go to Ashbourne, and I propose to make Dr. Taylor invite you. If you live a while with me at his house, we shall have much time to ourselves, and our stay will be no expense to us or him. I shall leave London the 28th, and after some stay at Oxford and Lichfield, shall probably come to Ashbourne about the end of your session, but of all this you shall have notice. Be satisfied we will meet somewhere. What passed between me and poor Dr. Dodd you shall know more fully when we meet. Of lawsuits there is no end. Poor Sir Alan must have another trial, for which, however, his antagonist cannot be much blamed, having two judges on his side. I am more afraid of the debts than of the House of Lords. It is scarcely to be imagined to what depths will swell, that are daily increasing by small additions, and how carelessly in a state of desperation debts are contracted. Poor Macquarie was far from thinking that when he sold his islands he should receive nothing. For what were they sold? And what was their yearly value? The emission of money into the Highlands will soon put an end to the feudal modes of life by making those men landlords who were not chiefs. I do not know that the people will suffer by the change, but there was in the patriarchal authority something venerable and pleasing. Every eye must look with pain on a Campbell turning the Macquaries at will out of their sedis vitae, ancestral seats, their hereditary island. Sir Alexander Dick is the only Scotsman liberal enough not to be angry that I could not find trees where trees were not. I was much delighted by his kind letter. I remember us, I was too much pleasure not to partake of the happiness of any part of the amiable family. Our ramble in the islands hangs upon my imagination. I can hardly help imagining that we shall go again. Pennant seems to have seen a great deal which we did not see. When we travel again, let us look better about us. You have done right in taking your uncle's house. Some change in the form of life gives from time to time a new epocha of existence. In a new place, there is something new to be done, and a different system of thoughts rises to the mind. I wish I could gather currants in your garden. Now fit up a little study and have your books ready at hand. Do not spare a little money to make your habitation pleasing to yourself. I have dined lately with poor dear. There's a blank here, but a footnote tells us this is Langton. I do not think he goes on well. His table is rather coarse, and he has his children too much about him, but he is a very good man. There's a footnote here from Boswell about his children being about him. This very just remark, I hope, will be constantly held in remembrance by parents who are in general too apt to indulge their own fond feelings for the children at the expense of their friends. The common custom of introducing them after dinner is highly injudicious. It is agreeable enough that they should appear at any other time, but they should not be suffered to poison the moments of festivity by attracting the attention of the company and in a manner compelling them from politeness to say what they do not think. This has come up previously. I remember Boswell or somebody else was complaining about having to be nice to snotty kids. That's funny. Anyway, back to Johnson's letter. It's wrapping up soon, I hope. But he is a very good man. Mrs. Williams is in the country to try if she can improve her health. She is very ill. Matters have come so about that she is in the country with very good accommodation, but age and sickness and pride have made her so peevish that I was forced to bribe the maid to stay with her by secret stipulation of £0.50 a week over her wages. Our club ended its session about 6 weeks ago. We now only meet to dine once a fortnight. Mr. Dunning, the great lawyer, is one of our members. The Thrales are well. I long to know how the Negro cause will be decided. What is the opinion of Lord Oncleck, or Lord Hales, or Lord Monboddo? I am, dear sir, your most affectionate, and etc. July 22nd, 1777, Sam Johnson. Okay, that's our Daily Johnson of the day. I don't like that phrase. I'm going to stop saying that. Till next time, bye from Boswell. Bye. Ending transmission.